Hello, and welcome back to another AFK journey video. In this one, we are going to be making a Dream Realm guide for the Alpha Bear, which is one of the new bosses in the new Song of Strife season. And, well, he is a beast, literally. He has a lot of DPS, though there are, of course, ways to counter that. And in this video, we will go over his kit, and then we will be looking over some different team comps, and I'll be comparing what you may want to use to get the best result. We will also consult Pridewin, who has released a updated team guide in cooperation with AFK Analytica, which is a very nice site, by the way, that does a lot of whale and in-depth testing for what teams you might want to use for the best results. And we will check out those as well. Now, if you come here to the Alpha Bear, he has the same kit, I believe, as when he was a Primal Lord. Of course, he's just scaled it down a bit, because if not, that would be rough. And this guide is going to also focus a bit more on the earlier stages, right? This is not an endless mode team comp. We are just focusing on the earlier stages of the season when we are now still dealing with the, common and elite versions before we get to the endless mode where teams may change up, as we will not have as much of a need for constant healing and shielding and all that good stuff. So, Alpha Bear, he has a Terrible that was the enemy, dealing damage. But the big thing with the Alpha Bear is, of course, his honey. Pours honey on himself to mark enemies in adjacent tiles. If there are no enemies nearby, powerful earthquake will be unleashed. So this is one big thing here when it comes to the honey. Of course, units that are honeyed will take a massive amount of damage every so often, and you will need a lot of healing and sustain to be able to keep them alive, which we'll get into when we come to the team comps. But if there are no enemies in adjacent tiles, then he will slam the ground, do an earthquake-esque ability, and that ability does a shit ton of damage. Like, that ability does a lot. So if you don't have abilities, if you don't have units nearby, you will really just insta-die from that, more or less. And that is where Florabelle, for example, comes into the comp, which we'll go into soon. After the honey here, of course, he throws honey to mark enemies, which is the big killer here. And then it just looks at all the different damage numbers, etc., etc. Of course, the ult here is summon the swarm to attack enemy covered in honey. This is where, the massive DPS comes in, when he basically just annihilates your units, even with a lot of sustain and shielding. Now, to look into the boss here, also, if you didn't see, I'm currently 17 on my server. I tried to keep top 20, though I never managed to. I'm so close to being top 20 on my server and top 100 in district, but it's just a very rough time. Now, you will be able to see here that most of my units that I use are all Supreme Plus. If you don't have those, I will be looking into a few alternatives that you might be using. Now, this is basically the current, let's say, Sue comp that Pridewin and AFK Analytica recommends for the boss. Smokey being like an off-tank healer, and of course, Coco with her shielding. Then you have Florabelle being a DPS, while also providing these summons, which means that there are always units right next to the boss, so it doesn't unleash his earthquake, etc. Technically, you would also have Rainier here in this position as the boosting to OD here and being the debuffer, but you need Mythic plus Rainier for that, which I don't have yet. Soon. So I am stuck with Kruger, as I assume most of you are as well. I don't really think the positioning matters too much for Kruger. Just put him anywhere, I suppose. So if you don't have Rainier, which of course is the best in this boss and the best in basically every Dream Realm boss, if you don't have him at Mythic Plus, then Kruger will be the second best alternative. But if you don't already have Kruger leveled up or insta-dies, you can also use Thorin as a third option, as it does, of course, also do some to boost your damage versus the enemy boss here. So you can try with these different comps, just while putting Thorin, I think, also anyway, doesn't really matter. But of course, again, if you have Mythic plus Rainier, put him here, or something along those lines, and see them crush the enemy. In my case, you will go to Kruger here. And we will also be looking at the damage numbers. I will do a few runs here on the boss, and I will compare Floribel's DPS to Odie's DPS to Mary Lee's DPS and see how they compare. Also, all of these three, Floribel, Odie, and Mary Lee, are all Supreme Plus and are all EX10. So there's no difference there. They are all sort of at the, let's say, generally endgame mark for their strength. So as I said, you have the Sue comp, which is with Rainier. You also have the Classic comp. Now, this is also with Rainier, but this is, instead of using Floribel, you have Mary Lee. But again, you want Rainier here, if you have him. And we can also test out this one to see how it performs, but for me, I think it will perform definitely worse. The Classic, I think, will perform generally worse than the Sue one. But of course, if you don't have Supreme Plus Floribel and Floribel leveled with EX, then this is probably going to be the best performing comp for you. Just pretend this is a Rainier here, by the way. You can also try out the Mage team, which Pride 1 Analytica also recommends. But for that, well, then you will need to switch over to the Stormcaller spell, and you will also need to have a, I think, very high level Cassidy or Brian, which also really no one does. Right? I mean, no one has Cassidy. I mean, I'm trying to get Cassidy's now because I have spots available to pull for in my wish list. But you need Mythic Plus and also leveled EX up for Cassidy, I think, and same for Brian. So that's not really something you would do. In that case, you would put, you would have Rainier in this position, and you would have, let's say, Cassidy or Brian in this position, at least by the Analytica team setups here that they recommend. But this is probably not a team that you will have, right? Only whales who really have this team comp leveled enough to really use. So I'm going to discard that as an option. Now, if you don't have Coco, by the way, at Mythic Plus or higher, minus Supreme, then you can use Corrin because you do need the shielding from Coco. That's the important part here, and you don't get that before Mythic Plus. So in that case, if you don't have it, you can use Corrin if he is your, let's say, Mythic or Mythic Plus or Supreme Plus, but he is much worse than Coco. So if you have Coco Mythic Plus, definitely use her instead, but Corrin is a acceptable alternative. Now, also, technically, you can use Elsa, apparently, going by this guide, on the team for the Mage team, and my Elsa is Supreme Plus and EX10, so I might actually test that out just to see how that performs. So first, let's actually test that out here. Let's go into our thing here and change over the levels. There we go. So first, we will go and test the Mage team using Elsa as the substitute. And again, of course, because I have no Rainier at Mythic Plus, which I think will actually make this comp very unviable, we will do this. And of course, we use the Stormcaller spell in this Mage setup. Now let's see how this goes. My current best there is like 27%, I think it is. Let's see if we can actually survive or not. Now, Elsa is pretty good, actually. I have actually liked her a lot. I did just get her up to EX10 today, because she is really good in PvP, on a side note. And as you can see here, she does have some use versus bosses, though not a ton. I don't think this team setup here is going to do much at all. It looks like we are kind of being extremely slow here, and Elsa's dead. Yeah. Again, I think for the Mage comp, you really have to have Mythic Plus Rainier, because we are just sort of going to be melt here any second. Yeah, we are not looking too good here. We might reach 20%, but that is far off my PB for today. And yeah, 21% plus minus. Yeah, that seems to be the end-all be-all. Here comes the honey. And gone. Okay, 21.5, right? Of course, you can test this multiple times to see if you get lucky and you get a high percentage, but that's probably close to what you will get. As you can see, of course, my Odie doing the vast majority of the damage here, and Elsa not really doing too much. I mean, maybe if I had Rainier, right, she might do more with the synergy there. But yeah, this is a team that is very whale heavy, so probably not for most people. Now here we can try with the, let's say, Sue comp, which I think is my favorite because I have the Supreme Plus EX10 Floribel. Also, let's again change back here so you can compare the DPS, because Floribel does a lot of damage, like she really does. She is a monster in her own right as well. So again, if you have Rainier, you'd put him here. But since I don't, and most of you don't, it's Kruger time. And again, if your Kruger is horribly bad, then your third option can be Thorin instead. So that. You can technically, I think, use the Quick Blade spell here as an option, as apparently, at least going by the guide on Pridewind here, it can give you a better result. I tested it a few times today, and I definitely got more consistent, better results with the Star Shard spell, so I think that is still the best one to use. But of course, you can test yourself and see what might perform best for your team. Now, if you don't have Floribel, and you want to try the Sue comp, you can also use Cessia as a stand-in. Keep in mind, Cessia has a much lower damage potential than Floribel at the same upgrades and level. And most likely you won't have EX10 Cessia because that's not really a good investment for most players, right? So, yeah. But if you want to try the Sue comp and you have Supreme plus Cessia and you have maybe some investment into your EX weapon, you can try that and see how it goes for you. But if you have Floribel, use her. If you have her leveled, that is. You can see here already 23%, 24%. You can see already this is much better performing. 25%. And now we're gonna die soon. 26%, 27%. Ah, gonna get a PB here maybe? Maybe a PB? Oh, PB. Nice. As you can see there, the Earthquake comes in as soon as Floribel dies, right? The reason you use Floribel here is to avoid the Earthquake because you always keep spawning minions or ads to be adjacent to the boss. Cessia performs the same role, but of course only having 1 minion instead of 3. So got a new PB, though very, very barely. And I forgot to check the damages, didn't I? Yes, I did. Okay, let's do this one more time, see if we can get a better run, and then we will actually showcase the damage numbers. Ay. Sloppy work today. After this one here, I will also be trying the classic comp with Mary Lee instead of OD, and also checking out those damage numbers. And then finishing off the video by just mentioning maybe a few other options you may want to try and see how they work for you. And again, this guide is definitely more focused on people that are dealing with a boss that is not in endless mode. This is more an early game-esque comp. Because again, in endless mode, you will have less need of a constant sort of heavy sustain comp as you do now in the early game because of a level difference. That was much worse. Okay, much worse. Also, again, you will see very varying results, right? If you don't have Mythic Plus of any of these units, then, well, you are going to struggle, right? Look at the damage numbers here. You can see that Floribel actually out DPSs OD slightly, but practically for most cases, they are very much the same. And I treat them as being basically equal in DPS. But yeah, you can see that even though Floribel is sort of a sub-DPS here, and more of a sort of ad bot that spawns minions to keep the boss from earthquaking, or doing his massive AoE, she still does very top tier damage. So Floribel definitely worth using if you have her at Supreme Plus. And if you are curious about maybe investing into her to like EX10, then I would say if you're free to play, maybe not the best investment, but definitely if you're a low spender and you're not sure who to invest in next, if you have spare resources and you want to try to push Dream Realm, then Floribel is definitely very usable in a lot of Dream Realm bosses, right? So I would definitely consider it if, again, you have the spare resources to do so. Now we will try the comp with Mary Lee here. Again, just pretend that Rainier is supposed to be here in Mythic Plus, but yeah. Again, most people don't have him because we are poor and sad and cry in the corner. When I get Mythic Plus Rainier as well, I will definitely be comparing those two things. Hopefully I get him by the end of the month, as I'm actually going to get Rainier from the Pity on Stargazer at the monthly reset. And I have a 33% chance of pulling Rainier from the Celestial like roulette in the daily login by the end of the month as well. So far here, I don't think that Mary Lee will actually outperform Floribel at all. But, you know, maybe... No, you can already see here that the percentages are not looking nearly as good. You can definitely see the true damage nerf, right? Really hitting hard here. But it's not getting close to the same impact, I feel like, as you would with the Floribel. Also, for some reason, my game is stuttering a bit today. But very odd. Sorry about that. Yeah, as you can see here, yeah, we reached 21, 22%. But 23% maybe, but now we're going to be dead. Yeah, there we go. So definitely, in my case at least, definitely inferior to the Su comp for me. You can see that even though Marilee is very similar to Odie, again, both my Floribel, Odie, and Marilee, all Supreme Plus and all EX10, you can see that the damage between the three is mostly identical. Like, their DPS output versus most bosses is very, very, very similar. Like, very similar. But here you can see that we still got less DPS, or less percentages in terms of damage, because we didn't have the same amount of survivability, and because we didn't have the ads to keep the boss from ulting, or from earthquaking rather. We died a bit sooner as well, I believe. But again, if you don't have Odie at Supreme Plus or EX10, and you have Marilee instead, you know, she's definitely a acceptable exchange, right, as your main DPS. But if you have Odie, definitely try to use Odie, right? Especially moving forward as well after the true damage nerf. Now I will go back to Floribel, as I think is definitely the best team for what I have currently. We will just switch back here as well quickly. And we will try with the Quick Blade, and just, you know, you can see how that performs as well. Now, of course, ideally, you would have like, you know, EX20 or something Odie, right? And then he would go crazy with damage. But that is a far cry from what most people are going to have anytime soon. So it's not really something I would even consider talking about at this stage of the game. Now, we'll probably get, you know, close to the same result or similar result. But we'll have to see here. Again, of course, RNG always plays a role. So if you are lucky, of course, you can get a really good run going. You can see there that because of the... well, because of not having haste, we don't get the ults in time for Coco or Smokey, which means they die in the first honey. None of them survive. While when I use the Star Shard spell, in my case, I barely get that off. Also, of course, in these sort of cases, in these sort of, you know, guys, whatever, you have to always just test things yourself, right? Because your units will be different than mine. And maybe your OD is much weaker than mine, right? Maybe he isn't Supreme Plus, only Mythic Plus, or whatever else, and he dies too quickly. And then you can just always, of course, play around with different spells and whatnot to maybe have survivability to get, you know, that last few percentages of a boss if you are close to beating it, or just having much more survivability if you're really struggling with the early phases of a boss. Just to get those, you know, highest possible scores, right? But the end all be all here, if you want to really push like the highest tiers of Dream Realm, the highest rankings, you will definitely need Mythic Plus Rainier. I think the main difference between me barely not making top 20 almost every day in Dream Realm right now on my server is simply because I do not have Mythic Plus Rainier. If I had that, I think I would comfortably be able to rank in top 20 every single day without having to sweat too much. But not happened yet. Hopefully though, at the monthly reset, I will be able to get Mythic Plus Rainier and showcase that as well for you guys in an upcoming guide later in the season. But those are going to be the general numbers here. As you can see, Crescent or Quick Blade here not really performing better. Do one last showcase here for the Star Shard. Maybe try to get a better high score. But this has been a, you know, general, simple, quick guide on the Alpha Bear Dream Realm boss and different team comps. You can try different team comps you can experiment with. I will also link the Pride Win guide here in cooperation with AFK Analytica, so you can check out the different teams and the comps and alternatives on your own to this boss and the guide. And you can make up your own mind and also learn a bit more about what you might be able to exchange in terms of units here to make a comp work for you. Also, if you look here, like Smokey does a pretty decent amount of DPS when it comes to the blue healing field. Well, again, sort of the same. Exactly the same almost, right? Most of the time you will, like this here, hit a wall that you can't really get out of. That's just sort of how it is. But again, you can see that Floribel barely out DPSing, well, I guess 10% more. So it's not barely, but very close, right? Barely being better on average than my OD right now, being at the same rank, Supreme Plus, and both EX10. Even Kruger does a surprising amount of damage, to be honest. So he's nothing to slouch at either. And that's considering Kruger being like, what, Legendary Plus. So that's not bad actually, at all. So that will be it basically for this guide for AFK Journey Alpha Bear Boss. I forgot which difficulty this is, but, well, one of the earlier ones, right? Again, this is going to be more geared towards people that are dealing with the earlier stage bosses, not the endless mode where team comps may vary comparison to this. But I hope you got some value out of this and got some ideas for team comps and units you might want to try and setups you might want to try. Of course, you can always try to differentiate your setups, right? Maybe move a unit to a different spot, see if that does anything different. Though for this boss, I think my setup here, largely based off of the AFK Analytica / Pride guide, is going to be one of the best, if not the best, sort of setups you can have with the spell as well. And if you have close to my units, then you should be able to rank pretty high, hopefully top 20 on your own server. But of course, that also depends on when you started the account, how many whales are on your server. Sadly, the biggest variable, I would say, if you are going to have a high rank on your Dream Realm on your account, largely depends on your server and how many whales are on your server. Like Vulcan, I've seen, has had like insane top 10 rankings being free to play just because his server has like no whales, right? But most people will have some whales on the account, so it is what it is. Anyhow though, if you got some value out of this or learned something new, please leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff to support this channel. I greatly appreciate that. If you have any questions or anything else, leave those in the comment section down below. I respond and read all of that. And I hope you have a nice day, and I will see you in the next AFK Journey video. So, bye-bye. See you next time.